Hello and welcome to my channel. If you don't know who I am, I'm Allison, and today I have an art challenge and tutorial for you. Each month we'll be doing an art challenge, and for April it's this barn swallow bird with apple blossoms. This tutorial is part 2, where we'll paint the apple blossoms. Part 1 of this tutorial is of the barn swallow bird, and you can find part 1 in the description below. Also in the description below, you'll find instructions on how to participate in this art challenge, as well as all of the supplies I used for my painting. Now let's get started. I first drew out my apple blossoms onto my watercolor paper. So I drew out some right here, and then also up here. And before we get started, if you would like to learn how I painted this barn swallow bird, I'll link the tutorial in the description below or the card above. The watercolor paper I'm using is cold press from Arches, and I have my Princeton brushes, so I will probably be using these two the most. They are size 8 round brush, and I will probably be using this one too. It's a size 4 round brush. And this little detail brush, a size 0 round brush. And all of these are from Princeton, and they are the Neptune series. I have 2 jars of clean water up here and paper towel, and I have my paints. These blossoms are going to be pink and white, and the leaves will be green. So I will be using this pink, and this is from Art Philosophy. It's part of the Pastel Dreams pan set. I'll link that below in the description if you would like to check it out. And I'm not sure what green yet I'll be using, but I'll let you know when we get there. Also, I have a photo of my whole entire sketch linked in the description below that you can download and then trace onto your watercolor paper. So I will link a photograph of these apple blossoms. I am going to be using the wet and wet method for watercolors. So what you do is you first wet the area you're going to paint. Let's start up here. Let's start with these first, and then we will go on with these. So I'm going to start with the flowers, and then we will paint the leaves. So I'm going to work one petal at a time, and I'm just going to drop in some paint, leaving some white areas too. And then I'm going to take my other brush, my other size 8 round brush that's clean, and I'm going to load it with a little bit of water, not too much. I'm going to blend this a little bit. There, that's it. I don't want it, I want some white to show. That's actually a little too much. I'm going to wipe some out. Okay, I'm going to take the same brush I just blended with, load it with water, and I'm going to now paint the petal opposite of this one, because if I paint the one right next to it and then add color, the paint from both petals will bleed into each other. Now I'm taking my blending brush, and I'm just going to drag this color a little bit. Now I'm taking that same brush that I just blended the colors, load it with water, and now I'm going to paint this petal here that's next to the very first one we painted. Taking my clean brush that I use for blending. So this is basically how it is with every petal. Now I'm going to work on this petal here. Paint the entire petal with just water. Drop in paint. A clean brush with a little bit of water and just kind of drag that color a little bit. Like that. And you might have to wait until some of the petals are dry to move on. Like this is the last one for this flower, but the ones next to it are still wet. So let's move on to this little flower bud right here. I am painting this petal with water. If you don't have two brushes that are the exact same, to use one for blending and the other just for paint, you can use a different kind of brush, like any that you have that you can use for blending. I wouldn't recommend really tiny ones like this though. Okay, these two petals next to it, we don't want to paint those yet because that's still wet. So let's move on here to this last petal. Trying to be careful about the petals next to it because those are still a little wet. Now we will move on to these not cherry blossoms, apple blossoms. Now, if you have too much water on your petal, then dry your brush and then soak up that water with your brush. I have a pencil mark here that I don't want to show through the paint. That's something to be careful with. If you first draw out your painting, because your pencil marks will show underneath your paint if you have a light shade of paint. Now I'm going to do another layer of paint on the flowers. So we will start with these since those are completely dry. This time we are not going to wet the entire petal. I am instead going to have one brush have paint and then the other one will be completely clean and it will have fresh clean water, and we'll use this to blend and this to apply paint. This is how I like to paint with watercolors. It's just like a technique that I have adapted. But you don't have to paint this way if you don't want. So I'm just going to add some more pink in areas where there's the dark pink. And then wet it and just blend a little bit. And if you want, you can wet the whole petal again and use the same technique if you want to. And with the second layer of color, we're just trying to build up the color a little bit to make the color more vibrant so that it's not just one layer of paint, there's two layers. It just gives the flowers more depth. I actually liked doing the wet and wet method again for the second layer, so I think I'm going to do the same thing for these. And as you're painting the second layer, it's kind of like defining the petals a bit more. So try to define them a bit more, as in make them look more like petals, kind of even out the shape of them. See how I'm defining this petal a bit more? So I'm trying to like make them stand out among the other petals, if that makes sense. And as you can see, there's a little bit of white on this petal here. So I'm trying to keep that. And then make this area on the next petal darker, so that it kind of distinguishes both of the petals. I like to do that too with a lot of my artwork. I refilled both of my watercolor jars with clean water, and the next thing we're going to do is we're going to paint in the little yellow pollen. I think that's what it's called. And I'm going to be using this size 4 round brush from Princeton, Neptune. And I might also use this size 0 round brush. And the yellow I'm going to use will be probably this one here, or this one. So it's a cool yellow, it's not a warm yellow. And this yellow here is from Winsor & Newton, and it's called Lemon Yellow. And this one here is from KMS Watercolor on Etsy. I think it's also, its name is also has lemon in it, so it's a cool yellow. And this yellow is very opaque. It's like gouache in a way. And this is the one from KMS Watercolor, and it's called Lemon. So yeah, I was right. I was thinking it was called Lemon or something like that. Alright, so now I'm going to wash my brush. I might add some more colors for this pollen, maybe some greens and oranges, but I'm just going to leave it there. Oh, I realized I forgot to paint this flower right here. There's a flower right here, so I'm going to do that real quick. Okay, so now we're going to paint the leaves of these apple blossoms, and I am mixing a green. So this is Sap Green from Winsor & Newton, and I'm going to mix it just slightly with this green color here, and this is Lime from Decadent Pies pan set from Art Philosophy. And I'll link these in the description below. I'm just mixing a little bit of this in it to warm up this color slightly. First, we will paint the leaves in loosely, not worry about too much about the detail. And then we will do a second layer on the leaves and add more detail to them and give them more depth. I feel like I added too much pigment there, so I'm letting my brush soak up some of that. And I'm leaving some white space in between each leaf to distinguish them. And you can paint your leaves whatever kind of green you want. It doesn't have to be like mine. I notice my leaves are all different. They're not like perfect. Every one of them is different, and some are like curvy, some are pointy. Going to soak some of this up with my brush. Okay, I'm going to add some green in between these petals here to kind of give the illusion that there are leaves underneath these flowers. I have too much water and paint my brush, so I just dab it on my towel, let it soak it up a little bit, then go back in. That really helps sometimes when I overload my brush. I have a lot of paint and water, so I'm going to soak some up with my brush. It's a little too much. There. I'm going to paint some green in between these petals here. And I'm keeping a little bit of white in between the leaf underneath and the petals. You don't have to do that, but I like to do that to better differentiate, is that the right word? Between the petals and the leaf underneath. gets to really tiny leaves like that, I use the tip of my brush more than I use the actual body of the brush, or I change to a smaller brush. That's why I like round brushes a lot, because they are very versatile. I can use like the very tip for little details and for small areas, and then the body of the brush for large areas. Alright, next we're going to add the second layer to these leaves. This time for these leaves I am going to use a darker green. So to mix a darker green, I like to add a little bit of red or purple to it, and that makes the green darker. I'm going to add some purple. You can see. And add a little bit more. Maybe a little bit more. There. And I am just going to add this in where I think there will be shadows in the leaves. I'm going to add some here. And here. Going to take another brush, which is smaller. It's a size 4 round, and it has some water in it too, but not too much water. And I'm going to drag this color a little bit out and blend it into the green color that we first painted. I'm going to add a bit more because I feel like it's not. Oops, it's a lot. There. So I just like dabbed on some paint, and now I'm taking this brush and I'm moving it around a little bit. This brush is very wet too. There's like a lot of water and paint in it. And it doesn't have to be perfectly blended. I personally like don't like to over blend my watercolors. I like there to be some watercolor texture in my painting. And it's a good idea to, like for one leaf, like I made it dark right here, and then for the leaf next to it to make the area white, like light. So this area here is dark for this leaf, and for this leaf right here is going to be light. So that kind of gives your painting more contrast and kind of helps your leaves stand out. So for this leaf, I'm not going to add dark green here. Instead, I'm just going to add it around this petal and then to the side a little bit. Then I'm going to add the dark green underneath these flowers, because underneath the flowers they would be dark, you would think. So this leaf here is above this leaf because this curves and then this here kind of indents. So I'm going to add a shadow under here. So yeah, this leaf here, this one, is above this little leaf here, so there would be a shadow right here. And then I'll add a shadow here on this other one. I might go back in and add a bit more shadow to these leaves, and you can add as many layers as you want to your leaves to add more detail and depth to them. But keep in mind that the more layers of paint you add, the less vibrant your colors will be, because it's the paper underneath, like the actual paper, that makes your colors look bright and vibrant. And the more layers of paint you add, the less that paper will show through, and then the less your colors will be, what I'm trying to say, the less vibrant and saturated your colors will be. Okay, so I am now going to add some final details to these flowers. I want to add a bit of yellow in some areas, I think. I don't really know. I'm just figuring this out as I go. So I'm taking some of this. It's called lemon yellow. It's kind of like this yellow that I used for the pollen, but this one is not as opaque. I don't really want a super opaque watercolor, so I want it to be more transparent. So I'm just going to add some here and there. And then blend it with a clean brush. Yeah, I like that. Okay, I'm going to do that then. I really like that. So I'm just going to add a little bit here. I feel like this gives the flowers more depth. So it's just not like one pink color that they're painted with. Next, I am going to define the petals a bit more. So I'm taking this pink again. It's from Pastel Dreams pan set. I'll link that in the description if you're wanting to see all the other colors in that palette. And I'm just going to add more of this color to define the petals. And then of course blending a little bit. Of course, you can't forget about that. Next, I'm going to use some of this iridescent paint. It's called Sunset in Bali, and it's from Canvas Watercolor on Etsy. And I use this paint in this bird, and I thought that I would use it also in the flowers to kind of help bring them together. So I'm just going to add it in some areas here and there. That is it. We are done. So if you want, you can keep on adding more detail to your flowers. I personally want to leave them like this because my bird, the barn swallow, I want him to be the focal point, so I don't want to make these flowers like super detailed. So you can keep adding more detail and building up the shadows if you want. But yeah, we are all done. I hope that you enjoyed this tutorial. Let me know in the comments if you will be participating in the April Art Challenge. I would love to know. I am looking forward to seeing your version of this painting, whether you just paint the apple blossoms or you just paint the barn swallow or you paint them both together like this. I would love to see it. And again, if you would like to follow the tutorial, if you haven't already, on this barn swallow, I'll link that in the description below. Thank you so much for watching. I will see you in the next video.